I thought we should start off, I'm going to put this down here so you can't see it yet, with a passage from a book that you wrote, She Should Run. And you wrote this book. We're going to read a little bit of it. Why did you write this book? And when did you write it?
So this book came out just a little over 2 years ago, and it was really
2016.
Yeah, it was really our way to introduce the idea of the need for women's representation in office using a little humor.
A little humor. And I'm going to tell you, before we read a little bit, we're going to read a little passage. It's fashioned after those books years ago, See Dick Run, See Jane Run, that kind of thing. So stick with me. It's a short read, and like I said, we're just going to read a little bit from it. Go ahead.
Kick it off? Okay,
Yeah.
here we go. Meet Dick. Dick is a congressman. This is also Dick. This Dick is an alderman. Fast forward. I'm going to get to a little bit of a punchline here. Joan always wanted to run for office, but Joan is not a dick. Is there room for Joan in a world of dicks? We'll leave it there.
See Joan run and see Joan win.
It's playful.
It's a great stocking stuffer, I'm
That's
thinking.
right.
She should run, and boy, Erin, did they run in 2018.
Yeah.
Women really had quite a showing, a record showing. Why do you think that happened?
It was an incredible year. So, look, this is momentum that we saw building for a while, frankly. So She Should Run know that in the political landscape, we sit at the very beginning. So women often come to us when they're very first thinking about running for office.
And you've been around since 2011.
Since 2011,
Yeah.
That's right. And we're really about building the bench. So what we started to see over time is that as our country continued and is still, in this place of polarization, that women really saw this as a moment to do something different, to say, you know what, we can do better than this. And we saw it coming into the 2016 presidential election happen.
Right.
It was a surprise to most of the country, the outcome of the election. And no matter what side of the aisle you sat on, women were saying, you know what, we have to do better than this in our country in politics. And that's where we saw just a huge surge of women stepping forward.
Because I feel like we've been talking for decades about more women, female representation, whether it's in the CEO, the C-suite, corporate boards, politics. Mm-hmm. What was it, though? Was it that 2016 showed us, oh my God, the polls were wrong, things can change dramatically. Someone who wasn't a politician sailed, essentially, it seems like, to the White House.
Yeah.
It shows us that you can do something unusual.
That's right. I mean, look, I think one of the barriers, there are many barriers to seeing more women in political office, but one of them is that women can't see themselves in these roles. We're drastically underrepresented. The country prior to this election sat at we were 102nd in the world in terms of representation for women in elected office. And so I think just that even imagining yourself in that role was difficult. And what we saw slowly over time is a course of more women stepping forward, more women, and now it's having a snowball effect, which I think is really great for the country.
I'm assuming everybody knows the numbers, but I'm going to throw some out there. A record number of women serving in the U.S. Congress in January. I think it's up to 102.
That's right.
Do I have it right? The increase most notable in the House. We have states sending the first women to the U.S. Senate, Arizona and Tennessee among them. On the state level, a record number of women elected to state legislatures, nationwide. 3 states elected their first women governors, Maine, South Dakota, and Iowa. This is progress.
Yes, absolutely. And that state legislative number is really important because it's often seen as not only obviously a really important role within the state in policy making, but also a pipeline for higher office. And it had stalled, women's representation at the state legislative level had stalled for decades. So this is, while that gain may not feel big, so we actually went from, I think it was 24% prior to this election to 27% now represented by women across the country. It feels like a small gain, but it actually is a sign of pretty tremendous progress.
We're kind of building out the bench here.
That's right.
Go back to 2011 when you created this, okay? This wasn't 2016. It wasn't Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. What happened? I mean, I went back there. It was the time of the Arab Spring, killing of Osama bin Laden, 10-year anniversary of 9/11. We had the Occupy Wall Street movement going on. Prince William and Kate Middleton got married. Not that that's important. What was it, though, then that also said to you, we need some kind of organization, an incubator of sorts, to help women?
So I had been working in politics for a number of years, and often with women who had just put themselves out there to run, and they were sort of at that point of proving viability to the institutional players. And we'd work our tails off, and I'd look at all of the resources that go in. The money that goes into politics, the hours that are spent, and then you would look after the election and see that often, in fact, more often than not, we were going backwards in women's representation. So the overall numbers weren't changing. There were some incredible individual stories.
Right.
But the research at the same time, and it still shows this, that the number one reason why women don't run is because they're not recruited and encouraged at the same rate as men. It's a natural part of the cycle. If you have majority of men represented in elected office, when a position comes open, it is more likely that you're going to tap somebody that looks like you, somebody that you know. And so it's just harder for women to break into that. So in 2011, we wanted to figure out a way to help provide anyone, men and women alike, an opportunity to tell us about great women that they know who should be thinking about running for office, so that we could plant that seed, so that we could build that bench. So we launched with a program that was an Ask a Woman to Run program, and it was our first start in the field.
How many did you start with? How many do you have now that are considering maybe a run?
Sure. So when we started, it was slow. We learned a lot of lessons about how much you can ask to get somebody to really tell you about somebody that they think should run for office. So we started from the beginning, and fast forward to where we are today, we actually have close now, we're just over 21,000 women who have been asked to run for office through our work, and 14,000 of them are actually actively preparing for a run for office.
That's significant. That's pretty cool. You and I talked, though, if Hillary Clinton had won in 2016, would you and I be having this conversation about the midterms? No.
No, we wouldn't. We would not be having the same conversation. So, we did a big sweep before the 2016 election to look at the landscape and see where we could add programmatic work that could be helpful to the field. And what we found was that nowhere was there a program where it was sort of that logical place for women to start, for any woman to start. And so we build out this program that's called our incubator, actually. Any woman can come to us free of charge, kind of get a feel for what it's like to run for office and learn about the tremendous resources that exist in the field to run. We built that program and launched that program just before the 2016 election day because we were assuming, like most because of polling, that Hillary Clinton was going to be elected president and our work was going to get much harder. So we had planned for small numbers. We had planned for how difficult it was going to be to get people into the program. And election day came and went. And I kid you not, I went from days of head on my desk to having to rewrite everything that we were doing to the floodgates opening and us getting thousands of women into the program pretty immediately.
There's nothing like the unexpected happening to kind of change people's thinking.
We were ready for it. That's right.
I want to talk to you a little bit about whether or not this is a one-off, and we've got a question I want to put to the audience. So take out your phones. Let's do this. How do you see this moment of a historic number of women being elected? Do you see it as accelerating? Do you see it as staying the same? Do you see it as a perfect storm and so kind of a one-time thing and not a clue? And we'll see what you guys think about that. And most of you guys are saying you see it as accelerating. Do you agree?
I do. I absolutely do. I mean, we have an interesting vantage point at She Should Run because many of the women who come to us are very early in the process. And what we see now, even after this election that just happened, is that the numbers are continuing to increase. So the bench is continuing to grow, which tells me that for election cycles to come, this is only, it's not going to be the year of the woman. I always say women, the year of women. But it's not just about this year. It is about every year being that same until we reach equal representation.
It's interesting, though. I mentioned that we saw most of the gains, or a lot of the gains, in the House of Representatives. We did an event here about women in politics before the midterms with our Margaret Taleb, kind of somebody from both sides of the aisle, and they said, the Republicans have always had a problem with women. in terms of bringing them in as voters. What's going on? Why do we have such a difference?
Yeah, I always point out after this election that it wasn't just a record year for women in office. It was a record year for Democratic women in office. So the story for Republican women is actually not a good one. So there were many places that representation went backwards. I think a lot of infrastructure needs to be built up to create the pathways for Republican women to not only be recruited but to be supported once they run.
Well, when you say infrastructure, do you say the Republican Party has to welcome women?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is clear research that you have to lead with language and with infrastructure that supports the things that you believe in. And so just simply saying it matters to have a governing body that looks like the rest of the country makes a difference in who you can recruit. And I think that the Republican Party is struggling to find the right language to use there. And so it can feel like someplace that's really not welcoming for women.
All right, so we've made progress. We mentioned 3 states elected the first women governors. It means that 20 states next year will still never have had a woman governor, just to put that out there. So we've made some progress. We still have 4 states that will have never sent a woman to the U.S. House. So this brings me to another polling question. I'd love to get your guys' response. How would you respond to an all-female ticket? I'm kind of making a big jump here, or maybe not. No way, not in our lifetime. I can't wait. Sure thing, but won't happen in the next 2 terms. More likely a female vice president first. So we'll see what everybody has to say about that. When do you see? Really?
That's unusual.
That's really actually encouraging. What do you think?
I think, well, I'm curious. I'm watching these numbers continue to move.
And just so you know, we'll get into this, they actually collaborated with Mattel, hence the prop, on an all-female ticket. We'll talk about roles of corporations, whether it's Mattel or others, to do this kind of thing. So
yeah, so look, I think that
I can't wait, sure thing, but won't happen in the next 2 terms.
You will not be surprised to know where I stand on this. And I believe that after seeing plenty of cycles with an all-male ticket, that we should be very ready to see an all-female ticket. That said, I think that it is really difficult, and I'm mindful of this, that it's really difficult for people to envision something that they haven't seen already. And so often when talking to people about the possibility of an all-female ticket, it is such a huge leap to think that we would be there that it's sort of hard to wrap your mind around, but I think we will get there, and we will get there quickly.
Why are we so different in the United States? I look at global leaders around the world, and they've had female leaders, women leaders, for a long time. What is it about our culture, our society?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of reasons. Some of that comes down to how we structure our elections and whether or not, in our country, a thing that we are so far from feeling comfortable talking about around quotas, which exist in a lot of the countries where this representation is much more equal. It's not where we are, but we do, I think you see a lot of the institutional players stepping in now and feeling more comfortable with language like targets. Let's acknowledge this as a variable that matters to us. That this diversity of voice and perspective in government does matter, and I think that will make a difference as we continue to see more leadership there.
When you and I talked in kind of preparation for this, Erin talked about the importance of kind of corporate involvement and being involved with Mattel. Right, you hit kids, you hit a younger generation. But talk to me about kind of the role of our corporate society, our corporate sector, in kind of helping women in politics.
Look, it's the partnerships that She Should Run participates in, and we have a number of corporate partnerships. To me, it is one of the strongest strategies to accelerate our mission to see more women in office. It is not on women alone or on advocacy organizations alone to care about seeing more women in elected office. We all stand to benefit from that diversity of voice and perspective, and so it is in all of our interests to see that. And it is in business interest to see representatives in their own organizations care about policies and step into these policy-making roles too. And we're moving slowly from a place of red line, no way politics. And I think as a nonpartisan organization, it's a little easier for us to forge these partnerships, but it's one where we're acknowledging that political participation is a necessary and noble thing in our culture, and something something that corporations believe in and are willing to put them to. But we have a long way to go to continue building out those partnerships in bold ways.
Right. Well, like for instance, so you worked with Mattel.
Yes.
Are there companies out there that you say, I wish this company would do this?
Look, I think every company could play
You
a
could be
role in this.
specific.
No, truly.
No,
I mean, I can't think of a company where I mean, I'm sure within a specific program you could, but I think that as much as we can normalize the conversation around political participation and move away from a place of saying, ooh, politics is dirty, politics is something that we can't talk about or we can't possibly participate in, with the exception of our political action committee that's going to support specific candidates.
Right.
You're missing an opportunity to build the bench if you're living in that space of no way.
Tell me about some of the women that you've been talking to who were elected here in 2018 and what you're hearing from them.
Look, I think this transition, I love that you asked this question, because I think this transition from candidate to policymaker is one that we don't talk about very often. And there's not actually a lot of infrastructure or support for individuals when they're making that transition. And as women who are often stepping into roles where they're underrepresented, they may be the only woman in the room.
Right.
They're looking for mentorship, which is one of the first things that we sort of talk to women, like find your people, and there won't all be women, but find your people that you can trust to help make the transition as easy as possible. Look for the resources that help you.
But as part of it, and I think about this a lot, because when we're saying diversity, it's important, but when we do it, we create these kind of segregated groups in a company, in an organization. So it's LGBTQ community, it's a female group, it's a whatever.
Yep.
And then, so how do you, we need to kind of get away from that, don't we? And you talk about women, I've heard this again in politics, that women have to kind of bond together, but isn't the whole idea that we've got to work with everybody to have the biggest impact?
Yes, I just, we had an event not too long ago, and Christina Miller from the Cartoon Network was there, and she said something that was really powerful, and I think really translate to a lot of our women who are thinking about running and are serving. She said, I'm a leader in an organization, and I'm the first female leader, but I don't want people to look at me as a woman. I don't want them to think more or less of me because I'm a woman. And that's what we are working toward, frankly, in politics as well, is we're working towards a day when there are many women on a ballot, and you're not sort of tagging it all onto one woman to be the everything for every for every person.
I don't want to just vote for the woman because there's only one.
Right.
You
want
in a million
many women on the ballot.
Right.
Yes.
And it's not a case too, and I think about this too with issues, and you said this to me, it's not just women caring about healthcare or daycare. I mean, they need to have a voice in all these issues.
That's right.
To get better outcomes.
That's right.
All right. So what else do we have to do? What do you see in 2019? Yeah. I mean, I hear things about, the bathrooms in Congress. It took a while for there to be, conveniently located bathrooms for women.
That's right.
Where, for men, they were right around the corner.
That's right.
There's women who have young children. There are single moms, who are trying to figure out how to make this work. How do we do it?
Look, I think one of the ways is that we have to check ourselves when we're hearing the stories. I know there's a young woman who was just elected to Congress out of California, a single mother who is very open about the struggles of what this is. There is no roadmap for her as a single mother coming to Washington and how she works through this. And rather than attack and assume it's going to be impossible, we have a duty, I think, as a society that should care about seeing her perspective represented in Congress, to be supportive, to know that it's not going to be perfect, to know that we can't just see the shiny side. We have to really talk through what the challenge is and create policies and systems and structures that allow for it to be easier for any woman who's like her to be able to step forward. So lifting up those women in their stories, don't hold them to a perfection. They're doing the best that they can, and then encouraging that generation behind to really consider it.
2020, what female candidates should we watch out for, either the White House or what have you?
Ooh, well, look, I think
let's go for the White House.
Let's go for the White House. I was going to say, hold on, the list is long. And by the way, I think on the list is long, and then we'll go for the White House. We are seeing, even in She Should Run's programs, a continued, I think week over week, we have continued to see this 900% increase after the election. It's incredible. I think from
the
that,
momentum
you
is continuing.
you see the momentum continuing. And I think at the presidential level, look, the list is long. It's more challenging on the Republican side, obviously, because that's a debate about who will challenge a sitting president. But for the Democratic side, we're hearing about Kamala Harris. We're hearing about Elizabeth Warren. We're hearing
Nikki Haley.
We have heard about Nikki Haley. Yep, there's some question of whether or not that challenge would happen within party. But I think I'm encouraged. Kirsten Gillibrand. I'm encouraged to see a long list and so many women on that list.
Do you anticipate if with a male candidate who's running for president that the female candidate will be more likely to be vice president this time around?
I think that
if we don't see.
No, I don't. I think if we have a male president, yes, I think that we would miss a huge opportunity there. But I actually think we're going to have a strong female ticket.
Good stuff. I can't wait for 2020. Guys, thank you so much. Erin, thank you.